Hi there, it's Kristen again with another children's message. Here at ministrytochildren.com, we don't shy away from topics that are a little bit difficult sometimes when we're thinking about addressing children. And it's important that we don't avoid the lessons that might be a little more challenging because they are really a part of the Bible and a part of our everyday world. And it's important to carefully and mindfully share these things with kids. So today's gospel lesson has to do with King Herod and his slaughtering of innocent children. Well, we're going to talk about how, unfortunately, that happened, and we're also going to connect it to another familiar story with the Bible, and we're going to connect it with the fact that God is in control no matter what, and that He has a plan even when things are very difficult sometimes. So here's one way to approach this potentially challenging gospel lesson. Good morning, children of God. Now, I want to talk to you today about some kind of hard things and some things that are a little sometimes tricky for us to understand. Now, I have a question. What do you think is something bad that you see in the world? Do you ever see things that you think are not very good? Like, yes, war. War is very bad. People get hurt, or if someone gets beat up, or if somebody bullies or makes fun of someone, yeah, those are really hard, bad things. Well, unfortunately, because people have sin, bad things happen. But God can take those bad things and He can make it into something better. And in fact, God is always in control, even when bad things happen. It's a hard thing to understand. But I want to tell you about two stories in the Bible that kind of have to do with this. So I want to share with you some clues, and I want to see if you know what stories I'm going to talk about. So, story in the Bible that I want to share with you has to do with a baby and one who had an unusual bed, and a really bad king who did some very unwise things, and an escape and an amazing rescue and life-saving Redeemer. So, can you think of any stories that would have to do with that? And I'll give you one more clue. The stories also have to do with a faraway country called Egypt. Oh, I think it's Moses! You're right! So, the story of Moses has all of those elements in it. Now, if you are not familiar with the story of Moses, there was a really bad king called the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh got upset and worried because he was afraid that the Hebrew people, the people of God, were going to come against him. So he made a rule that said all the new babies that were born to Hebrew women, all the baby boys, had to be killed. And there was one woman who decided she did not want her baby to die. And so she wrapped him in a basket and she put him in a river to save his life. And it worked, in fact. He floated down the river and he wound up coming to a palace in a place called Egypt. And he grew up in Egypt. And later on, that man, whose name was Moses, God called. And God said, Moses, I have a special job because my people are slaves. And I want you to help them get out of slavery. So God used Moses to help the people come out of slavery and eventually led them into the promised land where God wanted them. Well, it didn't make the situation with Pharaoh any better, but God was using that situation for something that wound up being good. Now, fast forward a little bit. There was another baby born, and he also had a very unusual bed, which was called a manger. Jesus! That's right. This baby was named Jesus. Now, unfortunately, there was another bad king around when Jesus was born, and his name was Herod. And Herod also got worried because he heard that there was a new king born, and he thought that someone might try to take over his rule and his power. So Herod made a rule that said all of the baby boys that were 2 years old or younger had to be killed, which was really, really sad. But Jesus and his mom and dad, Mary and Joseph, heard about this, and they escaped. And they escaped, and they lived somewhere else for a little while so that Jesus could grow up and be safe. And then when the bad king was gone, God told them they could come back so Jesus could grow up more. But do you know where they escaped to? They went to Egypt for a little while. And so, even though that was also a very sad situation, God was fulfilling something. Because a long, long time before Jesus was born, there were people called prophets who made announcements that said, this is how you know who the Messiah is. And those prophets had said things like, he'll come out of Egypt, and he'll come from this place and that place. And those things were coming true in Jesus. And God used even that hard situation to bring Jesus, and Jesus came and brought the people out of the slavery of sin. So just like Moses led the people out of Egypt slavery, Jesus led the people out of sin slavery, and did it not just for one time or for a little while, but forever. And because of that, we know that we have hope. And God was there the whole time. God knew what was happening, which for us can be hard to know. If God is aware of this, why doesn't he stop it or change it? But we have to trust that it's in God's plan. It's part of what we call his will, that even though bad people happen and bad things happen, and we don't always know what will happen to us, we can trust that God has got us and that his plan will come to be. And we also have the hope that Jesus came, and that because of that, we always can be with God, no matter what. And that's something that we can be joyful about, even when hard things are happening. So, as we continue on at the end of this year, the start of a new one, let's remember that God has a plan in all things, and that God is present, and he will always take care of us. Will you say a prayer with me? Dear God, thank you for having power, and thank you for being with us, and for having a plan, even when things are hard. Help us to always trust in you. Thank you for your son, Jesus. In his name, amen. Have a great week. Go make disciples, and Happy New Year. See you next time.